So thank you for having us. My name is Stephanie Prohaska, and I work at the Tacoma Needle Exchange or the Dave Purchase Project, and my pronouns are she, her, hers.
My name is Christiana Parker, and I also work at the Tacoma Needle Exchange, and I use she, her, hers.
So today we've been invited by Bob. Thank you for having us. And we are going to do a presentation on overdose response and naloxone training. I would like to start this training by letting everybody know that sometimes some emotions come up during training such as this. I know just in the last few years, a lot of folks have either been exposed to opioid overdoses or lost somebody close, whether it be a family member or a friend who has suffered an opioid overdose. So please be mindful during the training if you need to step away from the computer, if you need to mute the computer, just to give yourself some grace and some space during this training, because overdoses are hard and they hit home for a lot of people. It's very rare nowadays that somebody hasn't been exposed to an opioid overdose, whether themselves or in the home or in a community setting. So please just, again, give yourselves a little bit of grace during this training and even after the training. So let's go ahead and get started. So what are opioids? As you can see on this slide deck, we have a list on the left of what opioids are, and on the right, what they are not. This we get this question asked a lot because naloxone or Narcan works to reverse opioid overdoses. So on the left, everything from fentanyl to methadone to heroin is classified as an opioid. Things such as alcohol and Xanax and cocaine or crack cocaine are going to be listed as non-opioids.
So what can opioids do? Opioids can relieve pain, both physically and emotionally. It can also alleviate withdrawal symptoms, cause nausea, constipation, drowsiness, and what's commonly seen across the board is a slowed down respiratory system. It can also give a euphoric or comforting feeling or a feeling of happiness, the stuff that makes you feel good. And it can also curb your appetite. This also includes prescription drugs as well. So people who hurt themselves or get injured, or people who even have surgeries, get prescribed opiates to assist with pain management.
So fentanyl. We here at the Tacoma Needle Exchange, a lot of the participants we serve just in the last 2 years have had a lot of exposure to fentanyl, to the point where now we, in the last 2 years, have definitely started offering what we call fentanyl test strip kits. And fentanyl is 50 to 100 times more potent than morphine and 30 to 50 times more potent than heroin. So I know there has been a lot of like YouTube and TikTok, just a lot of social media uptick about the presence of fentanyl. Like if you touch it on a baggie, then you can overdose. Or, if you find it on a baggie out in the community and you touch it, then it's going to go through your skin and you'll overdose and die. And that's definitely something that we like to stop that myth and rumor from getting out into the community, because that's definitely not something that is true. It's more, we see participants here who are exposed to fentanyl or, take fentanyl pressed pills because it's something that gets them feeling really good really quickly. Or so we offer, again, those fentanyl test strips to our participants out in the community so they can test for the presence of fentanyl in the drugs that they are consuming. And it doesn't allow them to see how much, like what percentage of the drugs that they're consuming has fentanyl. It just allows them to know there is the presence of fentanyl in the drugs that they are consuming, so that they know to use less, go slow, tell somebody if they're using, and have naloxone with them so that they can be safe at all times.
We also just recently started a drug checking program here at the Tacoma Needle Exchange. So for those of you in Pierce County, if you know anybody who's interested in getting their drugs checked, we have a spec machine that tests for everything. And we also send it off to a lab as well to get it double checked. And it's been a really incredible tool that we've been able to utilize over the last month since we started. So moving forward, the risk factors for overdose. So there's several different risk factors involved. Tolerance is one of the main ones. So tolerance, if a person has been previously incarcerated or in treatment, or even if they've been sober for a period of time, their tolerance is going to be much lower. Some may try to use the same amount they did as when they used prior, but this can be very dangerous. Also, if they decide to switch how they use from IV use to smoking or oral, that can have an impact on tolerance as well. Health issues or body types or weight can also contribute to tolerance. So use less, go slow. Always try to let somebody know that you're using and keep your Narcan readily available and out. And if there is no one that you have available or safe, anybody that you feel safe letting know that you are going to use, you can have access to the Brave app or call Never Use Alone. Mixing is also another risk factor. So if they're mixing drugs with, if they're mixing with other drugs or alcohol, that can intensify the body's reaction. If they are mixing drugs, you can still administer Narcan, but the Narcan will only react to the opioid receptors on the brain. If you're unsure what drugs they used or what drugs they may have taken, you can still Narcan them. It will not hurt them at all, even if they didn't take opioids. But along with the mixing thing, you want to go ahead and buy from people that you know, and maybe ask them if they, if there's been any changes recently. And also just to reiterate, using alone, again, always try to let somebody know that you're using and keep your Narcan out and available. Again, if there's no one available or nobody that you feel safe letting know that you're going to use, again, I strongly encourage you to access the Brave app or call Never Use Alone, or even use with somebody that take turns with one another and watch each other. So that way you can be there and make sure you guys are being safe. People who have previously overdosed are more than likely to have another one. And then illnesses are also a big risk factor as well. So any illness or disease that weakens the heart or that makes breathing more difficult can increase the chances of having an overdose.
And I'd like to add to that as well, everything that Christiana just said, but also a lot of the biggest risk factors for people who experience overdose is being stigmatized and being made to feel like they don't have a support system, because a lot of people who do use drugs, whether it's prescription drugs, straight drugs, are afraid to tell somebody that they need help or that they want help, because they're afraid of what that stigma might be asking for the help. So just being open to letting folks know, hey, even if you've relapsed, even if you have used 1 time, 2 times, 12 times, like, we're here to support you and we carry Narcan. So here is a fun slide with a great little image at the bottom. I love looking at pictures. I feel like they really help get the message across. So what is an opioid overdose? So it's usually better just to say it's a drug poisoning. It happens when a toxic amount of opioids overwhelms the human body. So when the human body experiences a drug poisoning, what is really occurring is it's making it hard or sometimes impossible for the human body to breathe. So this can happen sometimes in a matter of minutes, sometimes in a matter of hours after the drug is consumed. And it really depends on the person's body. We're all different, right? That's what makes us all unique. That's what makes us all wonderful. So it really depends on the person's body type, what kind of drug they took, when they took it, how they took it. And the survival of that person depends on if they're able to get oxygen in. So when we give trainings to our participants, we always stress the importance of giving rescue breaths. And we always tell people a nice little, rhyme back and forth: a breath for you, a breath for them, a breath for you, a breath for them. Because the important thing to remember is within 3 to 5 minutes without oxygen, the human body, the organs are going to stop. They're going to start shutting down. The brain damage is going to set in. And so the important thing to remember is you have to, if you or a loved one experiences the unfortunate event of having an opioid overdose, after you get them that naloxone, get them that rescue breath so that they do not have brain damage. The image at the bottom shows that opioid, that little ball there, and it shows it fitting on the opioid receptor of the brain. And it fits nicely, nice and snug on there, right? So if they're not getting that oxygen, they're not going to be able to come out of it. We'll go on to this next little slide here. So as I discussed earlier, the Narcan is the brand name, or the naloxone is the brand name. People like Narcan, it just seems to roll off the tongue easier, right? So Narcan is the generic, naloxone is the brand name. And so there's a lot of questions that we get asked, like, can people misuse this or become dependent on it? And I've never experienced any of our participants come into the exchange and say, let me get 4 boxes of that Narcan. I'm going to go have a Narcan party this weekend. I really want to, just overdose and come back to life 3 or 4 times. It's definitely not something that I've ever had a participant, a family member, a friend, anything want to overdose and be that close to death and come back. So I always say the only way that a person can have a misuse of naloxone is if it can be harmful, is if you fill a bathtub with it and drown someone in it. So really, there's no contraindications, as Christiana, I believe, said earlier. It's not going to hurt anybody to give it to them if you're unsure. Because a lot of times if people have used multiple things or if they're on medications, it's not going to hurt them. The worst it could do is maybe give them a headache because you're squirting, fluids up their nose. And so again, there's this beautiful little image with these spring colors on the right-hand side. So you see the opioid receptor of the brain again, and then the opioid sitting on it. When you give them that naloxone, it is going to kick that opioid off the receptor, and the naloxone sits on it instead. Again, this is only temporary. So it starts to wear off 30 to 90 minutes. I don't know about anybody else here, but if I'm dealing with somebody's life, I'm not going to go for that 90 minutes. I'm going to go for that 30 minutes, and I'm going to get them medical attention immediately because I'm not going to gamble with somebody else's life. I'm going to get that rescue breathing and get them medical attention right away.
So at the end of this, we will show you guys both the intramuscular and the nasal naloxone, but you want to check for signs of an overdose. So what does an overdose look like? It looks like they loss of consciousness. They won't wake up, very slow or almost no breathing. Generally, it's a very pale gray blue skin or lips, or even fingertips. Their skin can also be cold to the touch. They can sometimes be snoring or have gurgling sounds, so things of that nature. But how do you know if someone is overdosing or really just high? On the bottom left-hand side, you can see the list where it goes from anywhere from relaxed muscles to slowed speech or nodding out. But if you shake them, give them a sternum rub or pull on their ears and they respond to you, you see their body like move in some way, or you hear like a grunt or like almost a verbal response, they're not in an overdose. They're just probably feeling really nice. But if you look on the right-hand side on the overdose, you can tell if they have like blue lips or fingertips, or their skin is really clammy, or there's like really slow, no breathing after you shake them or do a sternum rub, something like that. If you're not getting any response, the body's not moving, you're not hearing any vocal response, you're going to go ahead and assume that they are in an overdose. So after you have assumed that they are in an overdose, you will respond to an overdose by doing these things.
Yes. So also, I know it's come up before, like, how am I going to, if I don't know this person and they're a stranger, I may not want to approach them. I've had this happen to me, and, you know, sometimes out in the community, you don't want to approach a stranger. But you want to make sure they're safe, right? They're your community members. And you don't want to approach them and have them become violent. Okay. I like to yell, hey, I'm going to Narcan you. Do you need Narcan? I have Narcan. If I yell that 3 or 4 times and the person doesn't respond, then I just simply approach them very slowly. I get down to their level and I yell the same thing. Do you need Narcan? Do you need medical attention? That's a great way of approaching a stranger that you may not know, and you may not know that they need help. So as Christiana said, then you're going to check for those signs. And then once you've established that the person needs, is in an overdose and needs medical attention, once you get that Narcan into them, it's going to go right up their nose, just like you would do if you had a really bad cold and you need to give yourself a nasal spray. You're going to shove it up their nose, reach for those boogers, push the nasal spray up there. And then if you're not able to call 911, you want to yell out to the closest person next to you, call 911. This person needs medical attention. They're non-responsive. Or if you can do it, call 911, let them know you have a non-responsive person. And then once the Narcan is in their system, you want to, if you feel comfortable, hopefully you have one of our kits, which has a CPR face shield in there, start giving them that rescue breathing. If you're not comfortable with that, at least stay and monitor the person. You know, people, when they get left, you know, nobody's there with them. So hopefully you can stay, monitor that person until paramedics get there to give them the care that they need.
So after you have identified that the person is in fact in an overdose and you have administered the naloxone, you call 911. Tell them the specific location where you guys are at, and let them know that the person is not breathing and unconscious. I always think it's best to say that the person is just unresponsive, and because if you say that the person is going into an overdose, that generally brings police on the scene, and most of the time people like to avoid that. So I like to personally say that a person is just unresponsive. And here in the state of Washington, we are protected by the Good Samaritan law. That is a law which offers legal protection to people who give assistance to those who are or whom they believe to be injured, ill, or otherwise incapacitated, including overdoses. There are no liability risks there for when you are trying to help an overdose victim.
All right, so we'll go over both of the kits that are offered. There is IM, which is intramuscular naloxone, and then there is nasal naloxone. So, and then afterwards, again, we'll show you both on the camera. So intramuscular naloxone, this involves 2 syringes, and you'll see on the camera afterwards, each kit comes with 2 doses of naloxone. So in this case, you would pop off this little orange cap, which we'll show you, and then you would draw up all of the liquid into the syringe, and you would inject it directly into a muscle, such as an upper arm, a thigh, or the person's tush. And a lot of times people ask, do you take off the clothes? Do you need to have them a certain way? Absolutely not. You just put that sucker right into that butt or that arm, right through the clothes. And then again, you start administering that rescue breathing. So it would be a breath for them, a breath for you. And you want to make sure that you're not, you know, in moments of panic, you can over breathe for the person, but we as humans, you know, we breathe every day. We're breathing right now. So you just want to breathe naturally for the person. And so it's good, even when you're panicking, if you can just remember a breath for them, a breath for you, a breath for them, a breath for you. And we always like to tell people, try and wait 2 to 3 minutes. If you don't get a response, then draw up that second syringe full of the naloxone and do the same thing. It doesn't matter if you go in the same spot or if you do the different side of the tush and the different arm, just as long as you get that second dose in if the person hasn't woken up, and continue the rescue breathing. Chest compressions are not necessary. Again, we want to make sure the person does not go brain dead. We want to get them that second dose and the rescue breathing. I don't know about anyone else here, but I'm not going to be sitting there with a stopwatch or saying, Bob, can you count me in? Can you count 2 minutes for me? So if it feels like 2 minutes, it's probably going to be, closer to 10 seconds. But if the person hasn't woken up and it's my friend or my colleague or my neighbor, I'm gonna be there giving them that naloxone and giving them those rescue breaths to make sure they wake up for their kids or their aunt or their brother or whatnot. So again, at the bottom, as it says, oxygen is critical. And if I'm not comfortable giving them the rescue breaths, I'm going to be there with them when they wake up. I'm going to make sure that they're there. So those are the most important parts, especially. This is exactly the same, but this is for nasal. So nasal comes in a box, and obviously there is no syringes, and it's going to go right up the nose. So just as if you were having a bad cold, the only thing we like to say with the nasal is it can be a little trigger happy. So don't open it until you need it. With all naloxone, you want to keep it out of direct sunlight, out of freezing cold. Don't put it in your fridge. Don't put it in your freezer. I keep one in my kitchen in the cabinet, but it's not above my stove and it's not in my freezer. So once they're really hot and once they're really cold, they're going to be less effective. And same thing, shove it up the nose, push the button. Those receptors are going to suck it right up. The person doesn't have to be breathing for it to work. You're going to wait 2 to 3 minutes. No response. You're going to administer that second dose. And same thing, you want to breathe for the person. All the kits do come with directions on them and nice little pictures in case, you want further instructions or you have more questions. But remember that oxygen is critical.
So what's next? You called 911, you gave them Narcan, and now essentially we encourage you to wait with them for as long as you can. And also if you're able to, it could be different in the situation. If you're able to safely get this person down to the ground, roll them into the recovery position. So the recovery position, you'll straighten their arms and legs. You'll fold the arms closest to you over their chest and their other arm at a right angle to their body. Get the leg closest to you and bend the knee. Support the person's head and neck and take the bent knee closest to you and gently roll the person away from you. Adjust the upper leg so that both the hip and the knee are bent at a right angle. And you're going to want to ensure that the person is steady and is not able to roll. Because you want to make sure to do this as well, because in case the person needs to vomit or anything like that, they're in a safe position and they won't choke on their own vomit while you guys wait for further medical attention to arrive. And then, so naloxone, again, like Stephanie says, wears off in 30 to 90 minutes, but we always encourage people to wait on the 30-minute side, especially when it comes to somebody's life we're talking about here. After 30 to 90 minutes, the naloxone can wear off, but this does not mean that there are no opioids in your system. The opioid receptors are still floating around, and once the naloxone wears off, they could reattach and cause the person to go back into an overdose, which is why it's important to stay with them until we have medical attention on the scene. And if the person uses again after the naloxone has worn off, this can also cause you to go back into an overdose because opioids are still in your system.
So in wrapping things up, a lot of questions we get asked are, can you abuse overdose or can you abuse Narcan? I think that's something that we covered earlier. There's no potential for abuse. What if I don't know the drugs that the person has taken? again, give them the Narcan anyway, because a lot of times we're not going to know a breakdown of what a person has taken, and there's no potential for contraindication. It is legal in the state of Washington to carry naloxone. The expiration date is on each naloxone. On nasal, it is on the top of the box, and on intermuscular, it is on the side of each individual bottle. And how to store it. Again, you don't want it to be too hot. You don't want it to be too cold, like Papa Bear's oatmeal. It's got to be kept somewhere. Basically, try and keep it indoors if you can. In a cupboard is always good. If you want to keep it with you, you can keep it in a purse, in a bag. Travel with you is always good, so you have it whenever you need it. If you want to get more, if you use it, lose it, or give it away, come see us. We're always happy to get you more.
We also have 3 Narcan vending machines as well. If you have issues getting it over the counter, or you just don't want to interact with any people, we currently have 3 locations. We have one here. We have 2 locations here in Tacoma. The first one is at the Moore Library on 56th and Tacoma Ave. And then the second one is at the United First Methodist Church, which is on 9th in Tacoma Ave, I believe. And then we also have one out at the Ording Cafe out in Ording.
Yes. This is client distribution. If you run an organization and you work with clients or participants, and you're wondering what things that they should know to give out, if you're giving it out to them, we always suggest they should know how to recognize an overdose. If they're administering naloxone to folks, once you give them a kit, they should probably know like which one they're administering, how to administer, whether it's intermuscular or nasal. And they should know how to store it, how it should be kept. And they should also know the Washington State Good Samaritan Law, which I'm happy to send everybody that RCW after this, as well as the slide deck for this. And then this is the naloxone kit that I know Bob received a few, that maybe a few people on this call have also received. This is a electrical box, actually, so it is airtight and waterproof. And we put these together to give to businesses and organizations that are interested in keeping them. The QR code at the bottom left of the box scans to our Tacoma Needle Exchange page, which has videos and training, and has different locations where naloxone is available throughout Pierce County. It also includes 4 naloxones inside of it that are all nasal. And it has instructions in English and Spanish, and a rescue breathing CPR mask. So I think you can all reach out to Bob if you're interested in those. Is that correct, Bob?
Yes.
Okay, great. And then there is my information, and there's always more information at stopoverdose.org. And that is also our website if anybody has any follow-up questions.
Well, while questions are forming, I do have 4 of the Narcan electrical box kits in my car. 2 of our food banks have already asked for them and have them, and others went out to the community the last 2 days. But if you're interested in having one, please let me know, or you can talk to PNE directly. I'm happy to pick them up and get them to you.
And this for everybody's reference, this is what, oh, trying to throw it at you guys. This is what the nasal naloxone looks like. It'll come in a box like this. If you pop open this part, it has these step-by-step quick and dirty directions. So it'll just show you 1, 2, 3, and you can always open this part without actually having to open the top. But when you open the top, it will have more like more directions inside of there. And each kit has 2 that are wrapped up. I would suggest never opening them unless you have to. And then when you open them, they're going to look like this. This one doesn't have the actual trigger in there, but they're going to look like this. And you would, again, just shove it directly up the person's nose and push. And then the intermuscular are just little bottles like this. And they have an orange cap. And once you need to open them, you would take the orange cap off and they look like this. And the syringe would go directly into that gray part. Did anybody have any follow-up questions for Christiana or I?
No.
Great. Thank you guys for having us.
Oh,